Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is a guide to the weapons and crafting system as of version 2.0 of Dragalia Lost. Let's begin with a quick overview of what's new, then we'll jump into more specifics on how to make the most of the changes that have taken place. First up, Dragalia Lost's new crafting system no longer uses tiers or levels to delineate the power of weapons. Instead, weapons are now upgraded using unbinds, nodes, and by unlocking extra functionality. I'll explain more on how upgrading works in depth later in the video. Besides removing tiers, Dragalia Lost also eliminated many of its weaker weapons, reducing the overall number of weapons in the game, and those removed weapons now exist as cosmetic skins. Many of the weapons eliminated from the game were highly specialized void weapons with low stats, whose abilities only benefited the player in a handful of quests. Now that those weapons are gone, their abilities can instead be unlocked by upgrading the remaining void weapons, and the abilities apply globally to all weapons in a player's arsenal of the matching element and weapon type combination. As discussed in my Wyrmprint guide video, another change is that Wyrmprints are now equipped directly into slots on weapons rather than to adventurers. Up to 5 Wyrmprints can be equipped to a weapon, and the attachment of Wyrmprints is not permanent. 3 of the 5 prints must be 5 stars, while the other 2 must be of a lower rarity. However, one of the 5-star print slots is locked at first on most weapons and can only be accessed after enhancing that weapon's functionality at a low to medium cost. The last big change to weapons is that you can now only possess one of each weapon in the game, and you can be rewarded for the breadth of your collection. A new feature known as Weapon Bonuses grants stat buffs to all adventurers of a given weapon type once you've unlocked the weapon bonus for a particular piece of gear within that weapon class. A huge implication of the weapon bonus system is that there's now an unbelievable amount of farming, grinding, and collecting for players to do if they wish to totally max out their account. These are further power upgrades, and we don't have any hard new content right now, so consider them optional, but it's genuinely an absurd amount of materials, rupees, and stamina by current standards to max all bonuses. I know this will make players who enjoy the infinite content aspect of Dragalia happy, and for those who do not, well, I'll talk later in this video about how to approach bonuses as to not be overwhelmed. Fortunately, despite a lot changing with the weapon system, a lot of the fundamentals are still the same. The stats and order of power when it comes to weapons is pretty much what it was before. Core and Void weapons are the weakest, Chimeratech are stronger than those, Hydreigon weapons come next, and Agito weapons are currently the best in the game. The main difference now is that by collecting some of the weaker Stepping Stone weapons, you can apply their abilities and a weapon bonus to your higher stat weapons. Likewise, I would still say Chimeratech is the main bridge toward the endgame for new players. Chimeratech weapons have the stats needed for events, hard story chapters, and the easier endgame solo battles. They also need to be crafted before Agito weapons can be crafted, but we'll get into that in a moment. And finally, I would also say that the total costs of crafting and upgrading weapons are fairly similar to before the update. This is a slight reach when it comes to void weapons because they've been reworked the most, but for the most part, if you want access to the same functionality as before the update, you'll spend about the same amount of resources. That said, if you want the new functionality like bonuses and the 5th print slots, those do cost extra on top of what we were paying to build out weapons in the past. And in some instances, rupee costs are also higher, although it's not clear if that was an intended change. With the high-level overview out of the way, now let's get into the nitty-gritty on the new systems. To begin, let's discuss how overall weapon progression now works in Dragalia Lost. The path is linear within a weapon type up until you craft an element-neutral 5-star core weapon of that type. You simply fully upgrade the 3-star neutral weapon before you can make the 4-star one, then fully upgrade the 4-star neutral weapon before you can make the 5-star one, and then you fully upgrade that 5-star. There are smithy levels involved as part of the requirements for crafting, which I'll show on screen, but I won't dive into the smithy role in crafting much in this video, since in version 2.0 of Dragalia Lost, all players obtain enough resources to hit smithy level 6 after clearing or skipping past chapter 10 of the campaign. And once you max out your smithy level shortly thereafter, it honestly rarely comes up in the actual practice of crafting. Anyway, once you have a neutral 5-star core weapon fully upgraded, you'll now have some options about what to do next. There are 3 branches to choose from for elemental 5-stars. One option is to craft a core elemental 5-star. Another option is to craft a void 5-star, and in turn, a 5-star Hydreigon weapon. And the third option is to craft a Chimeratech 5-star, and after that, a 6-star Agito weapon. The biggest thing to note here is that the core elemental weapons are now sort of a dead-end branch. They're okay for obtaining skins and eventually collecting weapon bonuses from, but they're not a priority since they're no longer a prerequisite for crafting better weapons with higher stats. They also happen to be an absurdly expensive sink for bonuses when it comes to Twinkling Sand, but more on that later. Instead of crafting core elemental weapons by playing lots of Imperial Onslaughts, it's much more lucrative to work on void weapons and Chimeratech weapons by playing void battles. I don't think there's one right order to do these, but I would lean toward doing Chimeratech first, since that leads directly into the Agito 6-stars. The void weapons mainly help against the Hydreigons, but you can already beat the Agito trials just fine with Chimeratech. So to me, you can save the Void to Hydreigon path for later if you wish to, when your objective is more so to farm up the Void Battle and Hydreigon facilities like Slime Statues, Fafnirs, and Dracoliths, or purely to collect the Void and Hydreigon weapon bonuses. Ultimately, not much has changed as far as the flow of progression in the game. Craft your core neutral 5-star weapons, then build Chimeratech weapons of each element and weapon type, and finally use those Chimeratech weapons to take on the Agito Uprising and build out a collection of 6-star Agito weapons. The core 5-star elementals, void weapons, and Hydreigon weapons can be built out later on, or simultaneously as side projects purely for the weapon bonuses you'll get just by having them in your collection. So that's the roadmap. And we've talked a lot about bonuses, fully upgrading, and weapon abilities, but now let's break down exactly how all that works on an individual weapon basis. Navigating the upgrade page for each weapon seems to be a big source of player confusion, so I'll do my best to try and explain. In version 2.0, the weapon upgrade page for each weapon has 2 tabs, one for stats and the other for additional functionality. At the top of the stats page is an option to improve HP and strength, which costs whetstones and works similarly to how leveling up worked in the old system. Beneath that is an option to unbind the weapon, and some weapons have an additional option to refine the weapon below unbinds. Most weapons can be unbound up to 4 times by default, but if they have the refine option, once they are refined, they can instead be unbound up to 8 times. This is basically a translation of the tier system in the old version of Dragalia Lost. Unbinds 1 through 4 roughly map to tier 1 of that weapon, while unbinds 5 to 8 map to tier 2. And they're only available after refinement. This is why only the Shadow and Flame Agito weapons currently have the refine option available among the Agito. The refine option means unbinding costs are not linear. Unbinds cost more and different materials after a weapon has been refined, so it's best to save any Damascus ingots you want to use for the 5th unbind or higher. I'd personally suggest saving all ingots to grab the 5th unbind of Hydreigon weapons, since the 5th unbind is costly, yet it's the minimum needed to unlock the weapon bonus from those weapons. And speaking of weapon bonuses, that takes us to the functionality tab. This tab contains up to 4 options depending on the weapon you're looking at: abilities, copies, slots, and weapon bonus. Let me start with copies. Copies are needed for a weapon to be considered fully upgraded, so they're technically required on the 3 to 5-star neutral element weapons when you first start crafting to begin with. Outside of those neutral element weapons, however, you should most likely never use the copies option unless you really know what you're doing, because the costs are very high. The only thing gated behind copies is being able to use the weapon more than once on the same team, and there are now much better sinks for excess resources, like unlocking a weapon's bonuses instead of unlocking copies. There are times you'll want to increase copies deliberately, but by that point you should think long and hard and will know if it's worth it to you personally or not. Erring against making copies will help you more often than not. I would say the Wyrmprint slot is similar to copy upgrades. This upgrade isn't very expensive for Agito weapons, but it is costly for Chimeratech and Hydreigon ones. I would only suggest unlocking the 5th Wyrmprint slots for Agito weapons since they have the best stats in the game right now. For everything else, 4 Wyrmprint slots should be plenty. and you'd be better off using the materials it'd cost to unlock the 5th Wyrmprint slot on instead unlocking more and more weapon bonuses from that category of weapons. Whether to unlock abilities or not is a trickier subject. Ability upgrades are found on Void weapons, and a lot of them aren't really needed to succeed in Void battles. You may wish to unlock abilities anyway for the skins that come alongside them or for convenience against Void dragons, but be selective with these. In my opinion, only the Hydreigon Bane abilities are really clearly worth it, and they will work globally even on your stronger gear. They make it easy to auto or solo Hydreigon trials, but it does require 6 unbinds on a Void weapon before you can unlock the Hydreigon Bane ability. This means that for Void weapons, you'll often want not just 5 unbinds for a weapon bonus, but actually 6 to get that Hydreigon Bane as well. And finally, that brings us to the weapon bonuses themselves. These are generally costly, and as mentioned, they often take 5 unbinds before they can be unlocked, with an exception being core weapons, which require 4 unbinds instead. Bonuses from core, Chimeratech, and Void weapons grant a 0.5% boost to the HP and strength of all adventurers of that weapon type, while bonuses from Hydreigon and Agito ones grant a 1.5% boost. Weapon bonuses apply to all adventurers of a weapon type regardless of the element of the weapon, and you can view grids of unlocked bonuses and abilities from the crafting page. In general, when it comes to bonuses, I'd suggest doing the bare minimum unbinds possible to get them except on your Agito weapons. So that would mean 5 unbinds for Chimeratech and Hydreigon weapons, 6 unbinds for Void weapons, mainly so you can also snag that Hydreigon Bane ability, and 4 unbinds for core weapons. You don't really need to enhance these weaker weapons any further than that to get the maximum benefit out of them for your whole collection, and doing so would only expend precious materials and rupees. And speaking of materials and rupees, well, bonuses can be extremely costly to unlock. Unlocking all 41 weapon bonuses for Hydreigon weapons, for instance, will run you more than 400 million rupees and thousands of materials from Hydreigon trials. Weapon bonuses from Void weapons aren't as costly in rupees, but you do need lots of random Void materials to hit 5 or 6 unbinds to even unlock them. And when it comes to core weapons, you'd need over 1400 Twinkling Sand to unlock all the bonuses, since they are gated behind fully unbinding those core weapons at similar cost to the old version of DL. I would honestly just ignore these until you do all the other bonuses and have nothing else left to work on. For those who enjoy having infinite content to farm and grind, this is paradise. But for those who don't, try keep in mind that bonuses are a new additive system, so you're not missing out on anything you had before by not unlocking them. You also don't need to rush to unlock them. Think of it as further projects to work on at your convenience. Another welcome aspect to weapon bonuses is that although many of them require lots of play to unlock, they don't necessarily require high difficulty play. If you're more casual, for instance, you could try get all the Void and Chimeratech bonuses first, and handle the Hydreigon and Agito ones at a later time. Another recommendation I have is to consider concentrating on one particular weapon type at a time. If you happen to really like a certain weapon type, you can focus your efforts on unlocking every bonus for that type. This is a good way to boost the power of your adventures for co-op play, since you usually only need to bring one unit into battle. Eventually, it'll be good to get all of the bonuses little by little, but by focusing on the type of adventures you like to use the most, you'll be ready for harder difficulty quests as they release, at least as far as using your preferred units. The maximum possible stat bonus to each weapon type is pretty high, at 18% currently. Although once all Master Agito trials are released, that number will jump up to 22.5%. The exception to this is the Mana Caster because it only exists in one element for now. And for my final recommendation on crafting and weapons in Dragalia Lost 2.0, I'd like to remind you all about the importance of double and triple drop events. We need way more rupees and materials to unlock weapon bonuses and fully upgrade our weapons than we did in the past, so be sure to take advantage of the upcoming 2nd anniversary double and triple drops. In case you missed it, all of the Hydreigons and Volk and Kayan from the Agito Uprising will be getting extra drops as well. So, as excited as many of you may be to have realized you can now solo or auto those trials much more easily, remember to save the bulk of your farming for until after the double drop period begins. And going forward, saving honey and ashes for times like this is even more crucial than before. We've already covered a lot today, so I'll probably have to make a separate video on optimal farming. And, well, that's pretty much going to do it for my guide to weapons in Dragalia Lost as of version 2.0. So much has changed with the 2nd anniversary, and while weapons still aren't as easy to comprehend as I had hoped, I do think there are some pretty nifty improvements with this update. If you have any tips for other viewers of this video on weapons and crafting in Dragalia Lost, please leave a comment below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching everyone, take care, and I'll see you next time.